A little while ago, I did my first YouTube video on the filibuster, and it was pretty well received. A lot of folks commented that they liked my Mitch McConnell impression, and it was pretty good, but I didn't want to go to the well again and exploit his breathtaking hypocrisy, but then he said, "My advice to corporate CEOs is to stay out of politics." Well, after he said that, he had to be saying to himself, "Do those words really come out of my mouth?" So the next day, he comes back and he says, "Corporations are certainly entitled to be in politics in the form of campaign contributions." Now, as you know, corporate campaign contributions can be and are very often, if not almost always, made in secret. Why? Well, because Mitch McConnell literally cast the deciding vote in 2010 to prevent corporate donations from being disclosed. A little background. In January of 2010, in Citizens United v. FEC, the Supreme Court decided on a 5-4 vote that corporations are people, allowing super wealthy donors, corporations, and other special interests to use huge sums of dark money to influence elections. Now, this wasn't just corporations, but also unions, anybody basically, as long as they were Americans and had a crap load of money. Now, here's something most folks don't know. When Justice Kennedy wrote the Citizens United decision for the majority, he presumed that the sources of these contributions would be disclosed. Let me quote from his decision. "With the advent of the internet, prompt disclosure of expenditures can provide shareholders and citizens with the information needed to hold corporations and elected officials accountable for their positions." That's Justice Kennedy in his decision in Citizens United. Except that the court's decision did not mandate disclosure, and it fell to Congress to pass legislation to require disclosure of the unlimited spending by corporations and unions now allowed under Citizens United. So we Democrats in the Senate brought up the Disclose Act, which would do just that. Now, this is early 2010. Scott Brown had just won Ted Kennedy's old seat in Massachusetts, and now there were 59 Democrats in the Senate and 41 Republicans. And so Senate Republicans needed every one of their 41 votes to filibuster the Disclose Act and prevent disclosure of what we now call dark money. That means that literally every Republican in the Senate cast the deciding vote to block disclosure of dark money. Now, here's a bit of ironic history that just underscores the bottomless pit of Mitch McConnell's hypocrisy and pretty much of every Republican in the Senate. Just 8 years before this vote on the Disclose Act, the Senate had voted on McCain-Feingold, a campaign finance bill written by John McCain and Russ Feingold. One of the most important things that McCain-Feingold did was prohibit national political party committees from raising or spending any funds not subject to federal limits for federal, state, and local races, eliminating what's called soft money. McCain-Feingold actually passed in 2002 with a few Republican votes, and President Bush signed it. But McConnell and Chuck Grassley and Orrin Hatch and Jeff Sessions and all the usual suspects were against ending the role of soft money in campaigns. And what did they say at the time? We don't need to eliminate soft money. We just need disclosure. Sunshine is the greatest disinfectant. Disclose, disclose, disclose. As late as 2007, Mitch said, "I think what we ought to do
is we ought to have full disclosure of all the money that we raised and how it's spent.
And now in 2010, after Citizens United had decided that their billionaire friends could contribute unlimited amounts of money, the same Republicans are saying exactly the opposite and voting against disclosure. And when the roll was called, we all knew that it was going to be skins and shirts, and they'd have the 41 votes to kill the Disclose Act. Now, I was mad. So I went down to the well where we cast our votes. I went there to heckle the Republicans as they voted, and when Mitch came down to vote, I said to him, what happened to disclosure is the greatest disinfectant? And he ignored me, and he voted no. And they'd come down, and I'd say, what happened to disclose? And they'd vote no. Now, my favorite stuff was when Republicans came down to vote, and I'd say, what happened to disclosure? And a few of them would say, well, it doesn't cover unions. And I'd say, yes, it does. And then they vote no. And here was my absolute favorite. A colleague comes down, and I said, what happened to disclosure is the greatest disinfectant? And he said to me, well, it doesn't cover everybody. I said, yes, it does. And he said, well, unions? I said, yes. And then he said the stupidest thing any senator ever said to me. He said, well, let's say the New York Times does an editorial. It doesn't have to disclose. And I said, it's in the New York Times. And he said, oh yeah, no. Now, as I said, that's the stupidest thing that any senator ever said to me. And I know you're thinking Ron Johnson, but no, Johnson wasn't there yet. And I am not going to tell you. Now, Mitch is still firmly against wealthy individuals and corporations having to disclose dark money, and he explains it very well. You see, most political ads are now paid with dark money, and because they're political speech and protected by the First Amendment, they don't have to be true. And so the ads are much more effective if you don't know who's paying for them. Mitch likes to make an analogy.
Well, let's say you go to a nightclub and you see a ventriloquist with a dummy. And the dummy is named Americans for Tax Justice. Now, the ventriloquist is a multi-billionaire who pays little or no taxes. But it seems like the dummy, Americans for Tax Justice, is actually doing the talking. But the illusion would be completely destroyed if the billionaire ventriloquist was moving his lips, or if he had to disclose that the people behind Americans for Tax Justice were really a bunch of billionaires themselves.
Thanks for the explanation, Mitch.
Well, you're welcome, Al. By the way, we don't miss you at all in the Senate.
Well, I'm exhausted. I'll be back with another one of these real soon. Thanks for watching.